Alright, so starting from yesterday's video content. Wow, my computer just did something weird now. Sorry. Anyway, starting from uh, the lead that I gave by the end of yesterday's video, I want to make a few commentary on the idea of hedonism, and I need to define it basically because there are a few things that keep people from becoming hedonists, and one of them is the idea of impurity. And I don't know how to address this because I've come to a conclusion, but I'm not well aware of how true it is, of how its implications solve other problems, like the problem of impurity. The way I see is, how about the idea that your mind, your soul is impure, your heart is impure, but only if you let yourself be. Meaning, for example, suppose that I'm feeling pure now, like I'm an unhappy person or something, and then suddenly when someone asks me, or when someone just look at my face, I look at them pretending to be pure instead. And this cognitive dissonance probably has an effect on the mind. And how about the idea that impurity is hard to really find out? How about the idea that you should think of yourself as someone impure when you are already unhappy, and you cannot think of yourself as a pure person when you are unhappy. These are solutions, they need more development, certainly, but I'm starting from the idea that, for example, let's differentiate humans from irrational animals. Irrational animals are mindless, meaning they don't have what we call, they don't have a brain that is able to do anything else besides obey its genes. And its genes might be they might be potentially a universal Turing machine, but practically they're just non-universal Turing machines, and the brains certainly are that way. But the human brain can be configured with language, and that's its whole purpose. So we can differentiate like a cockroach, an annoying insect from a human, just like that. This is really important if you think about it. What about dogs? What about wolves? Maybe there is a degree of the aspect that defines a universal Turing machine. For example, I can configure myself with language up to a point, and that point defines my humanity. How about that? My rationality. So suddenly a dog has something like that. Suddenly That's how you feel a connection with that creature. But if you ever had a dog and you're a philosopher, you eventually, probably on the second day, you realize that it's a very poor soul because it cannot talk to you. It cannot understand you with words. So it feels like very limited, and there is a big barrier between you and that dog. And it's as if that barrier defines the dog, right? If you decrease that barrier, the dog would stop being a dog, start to become a person. and maybe maybe that's how it's supposed to be. That's supposed to be a barrier between the dog. But eventually, we have to understand the mathematical aspect of the soul. Um, Dogs certainly have something that is soul-like, just like some smart animals. Um, so maybe that's what's valuable here, right? How does that relate with happiness? Maybe if you're soulless, maybe you don't operate around happiness. Maybe you can behave like you're happy, but in reality, you're just a machine. You're just a machine doing something that a human identifies as happiness. For example, imagine an insect. An insect gets, you know, gets stimulated, and then it starts to move around a lot. And then, if you really think about it, you could say, from a poetic point of view, that that insect is happy. It really isn't, right? It needs to have a bigger soul. It needs to have a soul to be happy. We sure can tell that dogs have it. You know, people have this idea that cats are smart. I don't think cats are smart. Probably tigers and lions, which have bigger brains, they probably are smarter. And even lion cubs and tiger cubs seem to be a lot more alive than a cat. A cat is just a dumb animal, man. A cat's like just a machine. If you like cats and not dogs, I think that's a really bad sign. I don't have a cat to really make a full analysis on that. But if you like cats more than dogs, there's something wrong with you. Dogs are smarter. They are more active. They're stronger. They are they have bigger brains. They eat more. They are happier overall. They won't eat you. They won't eat you easily if you die. Unlike cats, cats are reported to eat their owners' bodies. I want to go from this subject um, to some kind of dialectics that should solve the question: what's the relation between your happiness and faith, for example, or what's the relation between happiness and intelligence? I think that from my scientific background, I usually I had somewhat an easier time being happy with less stimuli than some children, and from very early age. And my most productive days, my early programming days, was such cases. I've come across some studies that say that the higher you are on the social hierarchy, the more serotonin you have, and generally the higher you are, more I think it's called catecholamines, which is adrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin. But the one that I have, uh, I'm sure about is that you have more serotonin. And unlike dopamine certainly has something to do with um, pursuing goals and stuff, but serotonin is just plain happiness. And I think I've heard something like uh, dopamine, serotonin is made from dopamine, and dopamine is made by an essential amino acid called L-tyrosine. And to make serotonin from dopamine, you need vitamin C, and other stuff. And there's also something cool that's adrenaline is made from serotonin. So, for example, someone may have lower dopamine because they have a lot of serotonin. How about that? They are happy, they're like creative, but they're not like the personality type that is always looking to complete tasks. That's how I would explain it. And there's also, for example, the anxiety type. That what about the person who likes a lot of action, doesn't like working a lot, and doesn't like creative stuff? It's probably the case when someone has a lot of adrenaline that's made from serotonin. Um, Adrenaline also could imply anxiety, I think. So, if someone has low serotonin, he probably has because of a lot of adrenaline, right? And he probably has high anxiety from all the adrenaline that he pumps in his blood. But anyway, um, since I've come across the works of George Berkeley, I I think I made a few steps towards the conclusion that everything I'm talking here, like serotonin, dopamine, and adrenaline and other stuff, are ideas in your mind. And I really have to emphasize mind here, not brain, because the brain is also an idea in your mind. Because think about it, you never actually saw a working brain. And I know these ideas seem real to you, but you're making a lot of leaps of faith here. And it's in the bad sense of those words. You don't know the connection between the mind and the brain. You know there must be some kind of symmetry, right? Like if your mind is happy, if you're feeling happy, then there's certainly some process in your brain that you should identify. But the question that Berkeley brings is which one is more fundamental? Is it a mind or a brain? That's a really deep question. You, you as a human, as a rational human, I think the higher your IQ, the smarter you seem to other people, the more likely you are to feel in control of mental stuff, uh, or as religious people like to call it, spiritual stuff. Like the more intelligent you are, the more dominance you feel in that area. So even if you are an atheist, like you're very skeptical, and probably because of the way you were raised, the culture that you absorbed. Maybe if you are an atheist and you talk about religion and you're skeptical, but you're not the kind of atheist that just blindly starts to hate people. If you're not that kind and you feel like you have some kind of dominance with ideas that are discussed in this kind of arguments, you certainly would seem like a spiritual person. Probably, for example, take there are many kinds of atheists or just agnostics that have a sense of spirituality. It's simply very predominant, right? And they go like, I go to Asia and I will study this and I will look for magical stuff. They do that, and they can look for sources of wonders on lots of places, like the stars and many places, really. Yeah, basically above average, spiritually rich. That's what I would call them. But eventually, if you really want to keep being satisfied, like the idea here is, I felt this from time to time. It's like a constant stream of warm. I wouldn't say it's euphoria, but it's certainly something that fuels euphoria, fuels, right? And it can be like transformed into euphoria. But this thing that I'm talking here seems to be related with just optimism, something like that. You just feel good, and you feel like you can make some effort to increase that, and it's an intellectual effort, like the kinds of patterns that you're looking for. It's like some kind of focus that yields a good mindset. For example, imagine you're playing a game, and you know some of the game's rules, right? And it's if I were to say that like 100 years ago, people would ask how would it be possible to play a game and not know its rules. But since we're talking from today, from the current year, I can just mention like computer games. You don't know the rules many times. Like, for example, I play Counter-Strike, and I don't know the rules of the game. I just realized that I either know the rules or not, and sometimes I see that, for example, if they change some of the game's physics or some weapons mechanic, the game is just so complex, man. It's supposed to simulate real life combat in a very fun way. So certainly not even the developer really understands the meaning of this code. It's like his brain can only compute it in a very abstract sense, and he doesn't know the many implications of those rules, and he doesn't even know, probably since there are many rules, he can't even keep them all in his mind. For example, think of chess. Chess has a very simple set of rules. And the hard thing about chess is that your brain should be able to compute those rules and see the implications, right? But all the rules. You have access to it. You can look it up anytime. I wish I could give you another example, but chess is good enough, I guess. And but Counter-Strike, the rules of Counter-Strike cannot be summed up like that. It's really just a lot. There's a lot of complexity. Probably our language is not even good enough to describe the rules of a game. How about that? We can feel the limitations of our language, of our common language, when we are learning algorithms. For example, you can see that once you understand the algorithm, you kind of feel confused about the syntax that was used to teach you the algorithm. You can think like, wow, man, there's probably a simpler syntax, and it's weird that our language structure is like that. Yeah. All right. So let's go on. What was I talking about? All right. So the thing that really interests me is that I think the ideal way for you to perform actions is that, for example, if we're talking about games, and I'm talking about this kind of games, yeah, I remember now. This kind of games which you don't know the rules, is that you should be happy even when you lose. I'm not saying that you should be equally happy when you lose or win. All I'm saying is that playing should be fun enough for you, right? And I really mean fun enough. I really mean that you should be able to play at least 1,000 hours of that game. I'm trying to remember what I was saying about incomplete rules systems. Yeah. Anyway. Let's assume that that's the case. That's probably the case for reality. That's my point here. You don't really know physics when you are born, and even when you graduate as a PhD in physics, you don't really know physics at all. Trust me. You may know some notation that corresponds to something that can be measured, but you know the problem of inductive reasoning, and it's not the problem of induction. Induction is another thing. I'm talking about the problem of inductive reasoning. The problem is that you can arrive to a true conclusion by two or more false statements. For example, I think I've said this before. I'm just going to repeat exactly what I think I've said before, and imagine that the conclusion is a fish is an animal. It was something like a crab, I guess. Yeah, anyway. So this is easier. A fish is an animal. And an animal is not a sand, right? Is not a rock, is not a sky. And you could instead create a system that goes like this. A rock is a sky is an animal, and a fish is a rock. Now, all three statements are incorrect, right? And they arrive at the conclusion that a fish is an animal, right? A fish is a sky. A fish is a rock is a sky, and a sky is an animal, right? And it's just crazy to think that people believe a system just because it arrives at a conclusion that can be tested in a laboratory. You have multiple infinite ways of modeling reality, and to pick one, for example, you can use Occam's razor that selects for simplicity. And Occam's razor is mentioned many times by atheists, but it was actually created by a monk, a Christian monk. That's a fun fact. I think it was around the 13th century, something like that. I feel like I should introduce you guys to the idea of empiricism, mental empiricism. That's how I would call it. This is the idea. Basically, I like to repeat this because I dedicated a whole video for I think it was the second book, second Berkeley's book about this. But it wasn't clear enough. I guess it was too long, and I think I can sum it up now. Yeah. The idea is that think about something like a water bottle, because it's just in front of me. That's how I come up with things. Imagine an empty water bottle, and you can look at it from the outside, and if it's transparent, you can see if it's wet, if it's apparently wet on the inside, and you can see that it has dimensions, and you can see that it has colors, and you can even attribute a quantity to it. But here's the thing that Berkeley found out. All of his attributes are defined by the senses. For example, if I say that this bottle of water has a height, for example, from my perspective, it increases and decreases in size as it's closer and further from my eyes, right? And its colors also vary with the light that is on it, and it can be completely dark. And its number also varies with the system that is being used to count it. I have two eyes, but my brain understands that this water bottle seen by both eyes is one and only one. But since I have two eyes and they see the bottle from different positions, how does my brain, without any kind of inductive thinking, decides that the bottle is the same bottle, and how does my brain decide that I should have a dominant eye, like probably my right eye is my dominant eye, and that whatever is represented by my dominant eye should be interpreted as the real object. But that I have two eyes here, and all I see is the vision from one, right? There's a dominance here. This is so arbitrary, and when you think about it, if someone says no, but this water bottle is made of atoms, and it's made of particles essentially, and even these particles, they have do they have colors? No. So how do we represent them? And I do mean that, for example, black is a color in this sense. They cannot even be black then. So they have like what color? Can you imagine something without a color? No, right? Suppose that if it's transparent, that's a color as well, and the object assumes the color from its background, for example. Anyway, you cannot see something without color. That's my point. So these particles are colorless, right? And what about their size? You think of them as being somewhat like balls or something if you're thinking of classical Newtonian physics. But these balls have an arbitrary dimension, right? An arbitrary radius. So what determines that, if not the distance that you use to represent it? And okay, so you must be thinking, well, I can just write about these things instead of thinking like literally small particles, small atoms. Yeah, you can write them, but you're using a language that is built on the real world, and you know. So does an atom has a size, and is the size of an atom fundamental to it? Certainly, you can see that things are defined on each other, right? For example, I define the size of this bottle from a meter. And what defines a meter? Well, all the other things are not a meter, right? And this proportion of the size of this bottle and the size of a meter seems to be constant. And it doesn't matter if it's constant or not. Either way, all of its attributes only exist in a mind. That's the point. You could say, oh, okay, but the objects are abstract. Well, can you think of, if you even like insist on going that way, well, can you think of something that corresponds to abstraction that is not a mind? It's literally the most mental thing that you can think of is an abstraction. For example, if you may say, okay, so the size and the color stuff is just an interpretation of the brain. Yeah, it's an interpretation of the brain that is built with mathematical abstractions. And so do you see the point? It's just there's not the thing that can't be correspondent with a mental thing. And from a very empiricist perspective, I can say that, for example, I can think the rule of empiricism is this: I can believe in something if that is observed. And it's a very nice rule, actually. Suppose that I have a gold watch and I leave it in a park. And suppose that, it's a realistic park and people might steal it. The last time I've seen that watch is on some kind of bench or on the floor of the park. And do I know it's there? How do I know it's there? I can look at it, right? If I cannot look at it, then it may not be there. And you may think of ways of explaining how the watch goes, but the main point here is that the most trustworthy of all things, literally the most trustworthy of all things, are the senses. And even reason is built with the senses. There's no other way, right? There seems to be an hierarchy, right? There seems to be an hierarchy between the universe and you, and the universe is on top of you, and the senses define that. The problem with this is that it leads to a very, very spiritual view of reality. Um, it comes, it becomes something like the Matrix, for example. So you come to the conclusion that the best thing you can rely on is are your senses, and and then you have to define what do you mean by this? Like, for example, you can have a dream or a hallucination, and what about those cases? How long? How long do you have to look at something to know it's really there, right? For example, I look at a Ferrari in my dream, and then suppose that I look at it for like 10 minutes and then I wake up. What about the time perception in my dream? What about the idea that the way my mind works within a dream is just different, and I could be thinking that I was looking at that Ferrari for like hours and days. It's simply it seems that reality is really dependent with the mind. Okay, so that's the conclusion. So then we come to this conclusion, and it's the most down-to-earth conclusion that you can have. By the way, if you were skeptical about it, you were skeptical about science, because that's the way that science is created, by empirical testing, and literally by our own senses. And for example, some scientists don't believe in new papers or old papers, and they want to replicate the experiment, and if they do so successfully, then they believe that that's reality. And that's a very very powerful way of thinking, most reliable one. Okay, so what leads to this kind of thinking? All right. To answer that, I have to introduce you to something that's the problem of induction by Hume. And it's not about inductive logic. It's about, it's more about induction. It's not that problem of having many false premises and leading to a true conclusion. It's the problem of assuming that the laws of physics that you observe today, by the end of the day, imagine that you observe some laws of physics. By the end of the day, you written them in a journal or something, and then you formalize it. And the belief that those laws will be maintained tomorrow is unverified by definition. You can only verify something that already happened, right? So think with me, the problem of induction, how do you solve it? Well, you have to assume that there's something that defines reality. There's something that is constant in reality. It doesn't even have to be the laws of physics, for example. Certainly, we know that the laws of physics change, because if the observable universe had a beginning, that implies that the laws suddenly start working, right? There were no physics, and then there were physics. There were no laws, and then there were laws, so the laws changed. Like, if I have 0 apples and then I suddenly have 5 apples, suddenly the amount of apples that I have change, right? And I know this is somewhat fun to talk about, because some people will say that no, time doesn't even exist before the Big Bang. If you think about what you just said, you just use the word before, right? And that is something that I can tell you that changes in space, like the Big Bang, every change in space implies time. Um, time can happen without change, but change cannot happen without time. And that's the way we measure time. By the way, we use a constant change like a clock mechanism. And you could say that well, okay, I agree with you. There was at least 1 microsecond before the Big Bang. Yeah, sure, there was one microsecond before the Big Bang, but you do understand that if the observable universe had a beginning, the point here is that the laws just started, right? And this is really, really interesting. It means that the universe was created by something, right? And it is through the anthropic principle. Sorry, it's the idea that you need many universes to randomly generate one with the ability to sustain life, because the laws of physics are so specific to maintain life on Earth that you just really need a kind of random generator. So we come to this idea of a random generator of universes, right? It's called it's what's informally called the multiverse theory. And the multiverse in physics is another thing. It has something related to what I'm talking about, but what I'm talking about is the previous idea of multiverse, and this idea that there are many universes that with many laws as possible, and this explains why we just happen to be here, because we wouldn't be here if there wasn't laws that allow intelligent life to breathe on Earth. If one's is still troubled with that, and he wants to become a theist, I can very easily solve it. If you know some math, you certainly will follow my conclusion that in order to generate infinite universes, you cannot. It's a simple idea. Here it is. You cannot pick a number from 0 to infinity. You can only pick a number from 0 to another number, from between two numbers. Yeah, it doesn't have to be 0, but I was thinking of natural numbers. You can only pick sorry, I was thinking of natural numbers. You can only pick a natural number between two natural numbers. Infinity is not a number. It's not. And the thing that we rely on the Occam's razors rules implies that, for example, imagine if it were, okay, so I just said that infinity can't be used on random generation. So let's suppose that that's not infinity, but an arbitrary number, like a very big number. It's not infinity. Even if that's the case, this number is going to be very big, and we can achieve the same universe like ours with a very bigger complexity. For example, without we only have, like, if I'm not mistaken, we only have 4 fundamental forces. Yeah, four. Electromagnetism, strong nucleus force, and then there is a weak nucleus force, and gravity. Only 4. and we can achieve the same result with like 50,000 fundamental forces. Okay, and if even if it is a selection, a multiverse selection for universe from 0 to an arbitrary number, which is already weird, right? Like from 0 to, okay, so universes can only have 50 million laws, right? Instead of 4 fundamental forces, universe can only have like 35 gazillion trillion billion, like a very big number, laws. And it's just insane to think of an arbitrariness like that. Eventually you realize that what we do in physics is to doubt arbitrary things. For example, when someone said, why is the sky blue? And some medieval peasant answered that well, that's because God said so. Of course, that's because God said so. If God is defined simply as the creator of a universe, by definition, anything that creates a universe defines what's inside that universe. And what's mysterious about this is the arbitrary side of blueness of the sky. So that same principle can be applied to each of these laws that we find. Like, you know, it's the old case of a child that keeps asking why. Like, why this, why that, why is the sky blue, why that, why, and then suddenly the parents realize they can only answer so much, and eventually they just have to answer, oh, because yes. And what the child's trying to do is to understand how a universe is created from logic, right? And that's basically what the child's trying to do, and as if there was something very fundamental, like he wants to like understand what is happening between God's ears. What's God's think? what's God thinking to make the sky blue? And as a parent, you have to think that up. Well, I guess God likes blue and stuff. And, you know, that's a very complex answer, right? Those are very complex answers. Eventually, you have to realize that anything that ends up being the set of physical laws is still arbitrary, and you still have to explain that. And you can't explain with multiverse at all. If you believe in a multiverse, for example, you believe in a universe where Frodo is riding a dragon, trying to destroy Harry Potter before he creates all the Pokemons, and the Pokemons are evil creatures that are also good when they are high. And there is really no limit. That would imply, for example, an existence of heaven and hell in all sorts of way. Like there is a Nordic hell, there is a there is the worst kinds of hell, and it's not fundamentally defined, right? It implies that everything is possible. It's really weird, and I mean, in the physical sense, everything is possible. It's like expecting the maximum amount of chaos, while also, as a physicist, trying to describe the laws of things. It's a very unaffordable position. There's also the point here that, for example, a popular position here, and I really like this position, is of hedonism, right? And I mean hedonism as defended by atheists and but I do mean intellectuals, not the scum. Hedonism, like for example, the idea that you should not just only help people on Africa not to starve, you should probably go there and become friends with them and help them be happy. That kind of hedonism is the one I'm talking about, and that's something that the church does, for example. That kind of hedonism is a very interesting one, but it cannot be sustained if you believe that the universe is fundamentally chaotic, right? Because when you don't have a intelligent creator of a universe, the idea here is that you should still be able to find objective morality without God. That's the main thing that atheists try to do, that good atheists try to do, right? And they often come up with a solution that you should maximize happiness around the world. And there are two problems. One, can we maximize happiness, health and happiness, right? Because they go along. Probably there is not a limit to happiness. There's probably no limit. You can only increase it. And that's not really my point here. That's just an interesting thought, by the way. The problem here is if the world is chaotic and people are chaotic machines, and they are like very much like animals, it's weird to think that happiness is a solution here, because maybe what you're doing here is making sure that the planet destroys itself. For example, imagine some people are happy doing some really wicked stuff that doesn't go along. You cannot defend happiness for everyone and at the same time think everyone is just chaotic, right? In order to defend happiness, you have to believe first in like some kind of permanence that is achieved with happiness. For example, you have to believe that happy people are very likely to live a peaceful life, very likely to not kill each other, very likely to not destroy the planet, and so on and so on. You kind of have to believe in function that goes along with happiness. If you believe in immorality from an objective point of view, like if you think that people who don't believe in maximizing happiness for everyone is evil, then you have to really believe that whatever creates people is not chaotic, right? The idea against hedonism, for example, is such thoughts, and these thoughts are even predominant in Christianity, unfortunately, and they are predominant in Islam and other religions. If you believe in Aristotle, for example, Aristotle, if you believe in Aquinas, you also have to believe in hedonism, in the way that I described, like helping people, make sure that everybody is, make sure people are happy, right? There's an importance there. For example, imagine you have a child and you don't care at all about his happiness or anything, and you're just like a very boring guy that, oh, come on child, you have to study now, and no, you can't be happy, and you give no importance to his happiness. And that position unfortunately is common around the world. And if you think about it, what you're doing here, your main motivation is like avoiding some kind of pain, right? As if I want a good salary, so I feel secure. And if I want a good salary, I want to study a lot now, and I will feel really miserable for many days because I'm thinking of studying for long periods of time without any interest on the subject. And this goes on, and it's really arbitrary when you stop like, okay, so this is bad and now this is good, even though I feel bad for both. It's weird. Eventually you will realize that your morality is effectively equal to what you like and dislike. And okay, so how can morality be reasonable? You do like reason, right? And you do like reason. You cannot like reason is the thing that enables you to move your arm, enables you to walk and talk. As a functional non-insane, with the minimum amount of sanity, even even your intuition will be shaped by reason. Your intuition really likes reasonable things. That's a very easy argument. You can some things are the many examples that I see of hedonism being a bad system is of someone who had some kind of brain damage or something, and effectively they are unable to use rationality, and that's their problem, and that's when hedonism fails. But the thing here is that we are not an hedonistic society. We are instead a society that from time to time complains a lot. You know that verb to bitch. In English, there's a verb to bitch, and it means basically to complain, and it means basically to complain aimlessly, right? And it seems that is a reference to girls complaining, right? I don't think necessarily that's the case. I do believe that men should not complain. I do believe it's a noble cause. And I do believe that a holy woman, a very important woman, and a biblical woman should not do so as well. Because when you complain, you are, I think, sinning against God. You're like some part of you thinks that God is being unfair with you, and as a religious person, we were unable to complain. Religion is the idea that you should not complain. That's basically religion, and the opposite religion, like a bad case of Protestantism or even communism, is based, like revolutions and stuff, are based on the fact that people start complaining about stuff, and it's the idea of complaining forever. That's the idea here. Whatever state I am, that's a bad state, and if you really apply it, it means that life is bad. Because life is only made of states. That's all life is. And if you say life is bad, then well, you should end life. And then you become a Satanist. That's basically it. Protestantism, the idea of the name of Protestantism. I don't know about the specific religions, but the whole idea is that, wow, if you're protesting, if you're being angry, if you deny peace, by the way, that's what I wanted to mention. If you deny peace, for example, if you have a sword and you use that word to create destruction, to create war and stuff, instead of creating peace. I don't think that's a good cause, and thus that's a that's a satanic cause, of course. Religion is about the opposite. And I want to say religion because I want to help people who still don't understand Christianity the way I do. I don't like this obsession with like some specific stuff about your religion. I never liked the idea of sitting down like an idiot to meditate. I did like the idea of concentration, and I do think that maybe it has some use. I don't know. I certainly would prefer just studying instead of sitting down and concentrating on nothing of value and thinking that life is suffering. That's the core of Buddhism. But I do understand that many Buddhists don't even care about such statements like life is suffering. They just inherit a tradition, and it's okay to receive a tradition and make it better. Eventually, you do realize that we will have to talk about it. We will have to ask questions like, okay, so why why did this person that you think why did this person that founded your religion did this? You have to be able to answer that, and you have to be very happy as you do so. You cannot be unhappy. You cannot be like suddenly angry about someone asking questions for your religion. Is that person Satan in your mind? Like, whew, you're a very hateful person if you think that someone who asks questions is Satan. If you get angry at people, like this is, by the way, this is sad in the gospel. I don't know which one, but it's said that if you get angry at your brother, then you are surely close to hell. You're in danger of going to hell, and that's a very I used to be angry like that, and now I have some insight that says the contrary. That says that you should everything you can to receive a beating and get away happy from it, and to not be angry at your brother. And essentially, if you think about it, the main relation here is not between you and your brother. The main relation here is between you and reality, God, right? And if something bad happens to you, like if you get tricked by something of bees, if bees poison your skin, and come on, would you be angry with the bee? That's so dumb, man. That's like the rational animal. A bee is just a machine. It cannot think like any animal that I know, that I value. Like, it's probably way dumber than a cow. It's just a machine, man. You cannot be angry at the bee, and you surely cannot be angry with God. You can like blame Satan, but you know that Satan is not as powerful as God. You know that Satan only acts. His acts are limited by the will of God. If you do believe in God, by the way. The problem with one of those old religions, by the way, Zoroastrianism. I don't know how do you pronounce it. How do you pronounce it? I guess it's Zoroastrianism, something like that. Is that they say that the creative force, and the creator, right, is equal in power with the destroyer. And this is really easy to refute, but you can you can get tricked into believing that. You can be lied to about it, and if you're not happy enough to take the trouble of thinking about it, then you sure will believe on it. If you value an idea just because it's pessimistic, then I feel sorry for you. Like, for example, if you're a pessimist, then you think like this. You think that it's good to be a pessimist. So when you see someone who is also a pessimist, you feel like, wow, I feel good. So it's like some kind of perverted optimism, right? You feel good about feeling bad. That's basically it, man. And you kind of feel some pride in it, like, wow, man, I'm smart. I'm so. It's probably something to do with things like, if you're a pessimist, like, wow, man, I'm a pessimist. I take the hard path or something. You could probably be making a big mistake, like you avoid risks because you're a pessimist. How about that? You are anxious. You have agony. You feel bad about the past, even though nothing happened. You lose your mind, man. It's just a matter of time. What you have instead, you have an uncivilized mind, and since it's uncivilized, it has like seasons, like summer, winter, and stuff. If we were civilized, it would be an optimism. Yeah. Civilization ends up being defined in consistency. You're consistent, thus you're civilized. Civilization comes from the mind, comes from logic. The Greek word logos, which means word. If you develop your language enough, you will eventually build cities. You will eventually solve mathematical problems. That's just a matter of really, if you think about it, your language represents your brain. There's nothing that represents your brain better than your language, because everything that you observe can be identified and talked about. But if you still have like 2,000 words in your vocabulary, then you can really see the limitation, right? I mean, you want to say something and you can't, not because the other person won't understand, but because you can't, you don't have the words for it, and that's probably the good moment, because that's the moment when you, whoa, I have to create a word and stuff. But that's only if you value language. If you do not value language, you will just, meh, I will just go on and be depressed, I guess. You cannot be mentally active. Eventually, you will have to create an abstract correspondence for things. Eventually, you will have to have verbal intelligence. You cannot rely on non-verbal intelligence. That's a very, very dumb mistake. If you want to be active when you're creating stuff, yeah. You can talk about non-verbal intelligence when you're being like passive, like you don't know a word for a meaning, you for a pattern you just identified for something. You don't know a word for like a star-shaped balloon, you just identified, and you kind of wow, yeah, I observed that. I saw that pattern, but that's just a passive way of seeing it. If you want to imagine it, you eventually will have to consistently use something that works as an abstraction for that thing. And look, consider the way humans are able to be abstract.
When you're being abstract, you're not really thinking of the things you're talking about. You know how they relate to each other, but you're talking about an elephant, but you're not really imagining it. Uh, Ever hear about those people who are unable to not think of something when you say it? Like if I said, "Don't think about an elephant," and some people would go, "Oh man, I just thought of an elephant." Yeah, that's. By the way, that's a problem. I think that's not that's not something good. It just ordered you to not think of an elephant. You did anyway. That's probably a lack of abstraction. But when you're talking about the atoms and people, for example, when you talk about people, you may be able to talk about in a very abstract way. You're not thinking about all the people you met. You're not thinking about the many possibilities. You're like fixing on something specific about people, and when you do that, you just rely on verbal language. So abstraction relies on verbal language, and non-verbal. Sorry, verbal language. I meant verbal intelligence. Uh, so non-verbal intelligence cannot be abstract, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. Eventually, you will have to be abstract. You will have to be verbal. For example, I do believe that there is no difference between verbal intelligence and mathematics. Some people might disagree with me, but the thing here is that people have maybe they think that verbal intelligence is just like identifying words. It certainly cannot be only that. It must be more than that. Like it must be related to the ability of creating texts, creating literature. It must be related to the idea of logic. Thus, it must be related to mathematics. Thus, mathematics is verbal. It's probably one of the most verbal things that exists. It's so abstract, you don't even talk about the units anymore, just talking about quantities. And it's so abstract that if you start to get sad and stuff, mathematics can be deprecated. Like you can lose meaning for some kind of formality. You can create stuff that's illogical. It all depends on your morality, I guess. It all depends on your soul wealth, soul's wealth, in your purity of heart. If you just want to create something that's occult, and if you just want to confuse people and make them feel dumb and win money that way, then sure, you will be very sad eventually. From time to time, you realize that you're sad and that you do this stuff because you're unhappy and stuff. You eventually realize that your life is a lie. But if you go that way, it simply happens that mathematics degenerates. It simply degenerates. It's not mathematics, by the way, if you're fucking it up like that. It's verbal intelligence, that's the point. Anyway, coming back to what I was talking about. Verbal intelligence. So verbal intelligence is, for example, what I wanted to say is that verbal intelligence is what differentiates humans from animals. And it's what gives humanity to people. And I want to say that when you have verbal intelligence, you can like create stuff. It's like you have some kind of godlike powers within your mind, and you're not so you don't rely so much on material things. You don't rely so much on dumb ape stuff like sex. You don't rely so much on what some dumb girls thinking about you. You don't rely so much on the idea that you have to dress some way. Not at all, man. You don't rely so much on dumb ideas, man. So there are many examples of this. Probably video games. Video games, addiction to video games, if you think about it, is probably related to the limitations of the mind. Ever had an experience when you start to play a game and you play it for like 10 to 20 hours, and then you kind of learn how the game works, and then you are suddenly satisfied? Maybe that's what should happen with most games. And what happens there is that your brain, in its good performance, is able to satisfy yourself. But if you suppose that your brain is like is not good enough, suppose that the game is complex. I mean, every game, every video game must be complex enough that you should play it for thousands of hours. But imagine that the game I'm talking about is complex enough that you're never able to hold it in your mind, and so you're hooked, right? You took the bait. That's probably how video game addiction happens. And you see, a mathematician seems like a very magical being, because he's able to do something of value with just his brain, right? He doesn't even have to use paper. He may need paper or blackboard or something to explain what he already knows, but to really think about it, he just needs his brain. Same goes for physicists. I don't know, physicists, I like more physicists because they have authority, like they have a laboratory, they are really scientists. Overall, physicists are smarter than mathematicians. But and by the way, every physicist is a mathematician. The hierarchy goes like this: computer scientist. I'm not going to use the word engineer, because an engineer is basically a physicist. He's a physicist. No way, man. He's like a physicist who took a crash course, like took a really fast summer course, and he specialized. That's what an engineer is. Really, he's a specialized physicist. Computer science, however, is more arbitrary. The way I would make an hierarchy would be computer scientists, even though I respect a lot computer scientists, I really do respect them. And then mathematicians are like people who know how to use their brain and don't rely much on a computer. And then there are physicists, like imagine like this: computer science wants to know how a computer can be used. Interesting things should be done with a computer. Let's say that. And then the mathematician wants to know interesting things should be done with logic and a brain, right? Because everything that a mathematician does is basically to program. And by the way, I don't think there's a difference between a philosopher and a mathematician. Certainly a mathematician is a philosopher of quantity, right? It depends, yeah. But in a general sense, it's quantity. It's a philosopher, and he wants to like discover the truth. But it's not a physical truth. He's an interest to that physical truth. And I would say that he also wants to see how his brain works, I guess. Um, so a computer scientist programs his computer. What I'm talking about? Computer scientist programs his computer. A mathematician, philosopher programs his brain, and the physicist wants like to program reality. Wants to do magic. Basically, a physicist is like a magician who failed at Hogwarts or something. He's the guy looking at a tree and going like, why, why is this tree? What is this tree? And the mathematician just this tree has like 35 tons or something. It has like 10 fruits. And he then wants to see how many fruits people get. Like if there are 4 people and there are like 20 fruits, he knows, oh man, so each person gets 5 fruits and now I'm happy. So he basically wants to like play with his brain. And the computer science wants to play with a machine. It's paradoxical, right? He wants to play, so that's why the best one is a physicist, because think about it. A computer scientist don't care about his brain. So it's like he doesn't see the limitation of his brain. He just wants to use a computer. And he doesn't see that he needs a brain to do that. Like, he doesn't give importance to it. And maybe he sees a computer as a very different thing than a brain. And then the mathematician, he doesn't care about his diet. He doesn't care about physics. He doesn't care about his brain and stuff. And he doesn't care about how his performance changes during the day. He doesn't care about real world stuff. And I guess he ignores that limitation, right? He just wants you, look, brain, remember this number, remember that number, now let's multiply it. Alright, remember this equation, that equation, now let's do this. Okay, that's what he wants to do. That can be useful in computer science, but what comes first is mathematics, right? And then there's physicists, and the physicist wants to go even deeper. He says like this: okay, so there's a computer, there's a brain, and what else? What else is there? Like, a mathematician sees a brain as something different from reality, probably, but a physicist doesn't really see the separation. Like, a physicist has a trouble calling something artificial and something else natural. A physicist really has to explain how the mathematician is able to do what he does, how the computer is programmed that way, and how the computer works. And you can see that there's a big hierarchy there. Ideally, and do say ideally, if everything is like fundamentally minds, then the one above physics and would be something like I don't want to use the word psychology, but I want to explain that there's a relation between physics and the word psych. Physique, psych, which means mind, by the way. Like, eventually, we know that we have some kind of materialism in physics today, and we know that there's a lot of bureaucracy, and we are led to believe that we just have to shut up and respect the people who are materialists and who are supposed to explain reality by learning a thing or two about physics, about modern physics, which is incomplete, by the way. It's very troublesome. I wish we had all physics figured out by now, but it just isn't. And suppose this. Suppose that we have figured out physics. It's figured out. What is the next step? Like by physics, I mean we know all the fundamental laws. We know how black holes exist. We know we can predict any system. We have like a model of reality, of observable reality. Imagine that happens. What's the next thing to do? Is it just mathematics? Is it just playing video games? That's a very hard question. It would be an unfinished thing. That's what I think. If we had like a fundamental set of laws, I wouldn't be satisfied. More like I would be happy enough to keep thinking about it and try to understand how those arbitrary laws came about. So that means that I would have to go and explain how physics comes from logic. That's the thing. How does physics comes from mathematics? How does physics comes from philosophy? And one way we had the only way I had as an explanation for that was through Berkeley's worldview, which puts the mind above matter. Like every matter relies on the mind. The mind. The mind is like the essence, is like fundamental necessity here.
A study between a study that has as its basis the mind, what we call psychology in my special world, like in my heaven. Instead of talking about why don't you like oranges and why I have trouble listening to my mother, as psychologists do today, I guess if it were to have like 40 like 140 plus IQ points, and they probably have 110, so that's like if they had a bonus of 30 points to their IQs, they would be probably interested enough to go there and see like and find a real source of joy, that is to understand the concept of mind, to understand theology in a sense. And okay, so I'm talking about now minds as the study of minds, for example, as the probably most important stuff, and that's what explains physics. That's what defines the laws of physics. That's what I think defines laws of physics. The laws of physics are made to suit mental interactions. And as I said, um, mental interactions that includes even of um, small minds like dogs, um, not other animals like bugs and cockroaches, but dogs. Dogs count, and it's very good that this is such an intuitive idea that, for example, I can kill a cockroach, but I cannot kill a dog. I can kill a cow because a cow is much dumber than a dog is. I can certainly kill a chicken because it's mindless. I can do it in a very humble way, by the way. Um, Certainly, these animals have somewhat a mind. I'm not sure. I don't know if they have. But it's not of our interest to make them suffer, right? And these are animals that were always hunted. Like the cow, the chicken, they were always hunted. They are selected for being hunted down. Their whole purpose is this one. They're not, yeah, they're not necessarily suffering. Like we're creating lives by increasing the number of chicken. I don't know how chicken functions. I probably think it's just a machine. A cow must be selected to work just like a machine as well. Um, in general, cows are much more sensitive than chickens, of course. Um, they're I don't know if pigs are better than cows. It depends, right? It depends on the pig. But they're very dumb. Yeah. And what defines the laws of physics is this hierarchy of minds. I would go far and say that, wow, maybe there's a big difference between dogs and cows. Like a really big difference. And maybe there's a big difference between dogs and people. And maybe I'm just projecting myself on a dog. Maybe a dog has like glimpses of soul. It certainly has a soul. It depends on the dog, right? Maybe not every human has a soul as well. Maybe some humans out there are just like machines without the ability to understand what is being said right now. For example, in this podcast, if you're not understanding it, you have no soul. Joke. Okay, of course that's a joke. But certainly, it would be interesting to think that uh, the problem of attention deficit disorder is deeper than you think. But in a way, it's okay to think that your soul may be bigger and smaller depending on the time, and that attention deficit disorder is the lack of a soul in a mathematical quantified way. Like he has less of a soul, should not pay attention to what I'm saying right now, and that person has more soul because he pays attention. And imagine that some human is not paying attention at me, but a dog is. And the dog is very helpful and he's very happy and interesting, and interest. um, I guess that would define his soul. Maybe it's not even about the species, because if I'm talking about minds, only minds are defined, and it's really not even about the species if you think about it. Species is a physical concept. What defines reality are minds. Yeah. So anyway, going forward, I know already what I'm going to say. I'm just trying to create some ground.
going forward, I like to see, and I like to talk about those stories in the Bible in which the main characters are someone and God, like just two characters, right? And these are the best if you think about it, because they represent the fundamental relation that defines reality, right? For example, you are a mind and you exist within the mind of God, right? Uh, uh, you exist as a with the permission of an infinite mind, and it's like God gave you took a it's like God created some mind to be free, basically, and every interaction, and I mean every interaction uh, between minds that are not God necessarily has to be with the permission of God. So it seems that the basic relation, the fundamental relation, is between a mind and God. It's like in order to talk to other people, you need to have a telephone, right? You need to have a system that communicates to a central area, even if it's just I don't know, voice by IP, voice by IP, um, even if it's just Skype or something, or just the internet. You need a system that could be the internet. You can see the internet as something that calculates and computes. You can see it as a, at least in the mechanical sense, a mind. You need a medium, like something that is able to compute, to talk to other minds. So the fundamental relation, the most important thing you need here is basically your relation with reality, with God. So the stories that I'm interested in are like the story of Job. On the it's very early in the Bible, but I think it's after Moses. Yeah, and it's the story about a man that is considered to be a very holy man, a very respectable man, and he has possessions, and people like him, and they notice that he's very dedicated to dedicated to the temple, dedicated to sacrifices, animal sacrifices. If you don't know what are animal sacrifices, what they are for, it's an idea, it's a representation of it's like a way for humans to see how base and how beastly and how impure they are. It's like to represent, it's like to display, it's like to sacrifice an animal, a a very small soul animal, like a sheep or something, and it ends up acting as a reflection. We will sacrifice this animal because we're sinful. It's a weird thing to do, and it's of course it's abolished eventually with the coming of Christ, right? He says he doesn't want. Our Lord says he doesn't want cute animal sacrifice, like little animal sacrifices, and then it stops. And then, anyway, in that time, you can see that if the Old Testament was perfect, if the Torah was perfect, we wouldn't need a Messiah, right? But it is not perfect, but it has a lot of value, and one of the values is the story of Job. And Job basically is one of those guys that becomes notorious for his ritualistic discipline and his occupation with what we perceive as religion. And eventually, it says, of course, it's an allegory, and that's that's a fun part. I think that's a bonus. And the allegory is that Satan comes to talk to God, and he says like, "Aha! I can make Job hate you, and I can make him be disgraceful to you." And God allows Satan to take away his possessions. I think take away his wife and kill some of his children. And of course, this may never had happened because it's such a perfect story. It seems only to display a situation in a very explanatory way. Anyway, he loses a lot of property. He loses his wife. He loses his friends and stuff, and he still won't curse God. Then Satan comes again and says, "Okay, God, I want you to try again, and this time I'm sure that he will curse you, and then he will be very angry and sad, and just give me another chance." And then he does that, and what Satan does this time is he takes away Job's health. Job becomes a very ill person. He becomes unhealthy in a very disturbing way, and people won't even come near him because they think he's disgusting and stuff. So no one talks to him. So he becomes very lonely, and he becomes very sick, and he feels bad all the time. From a very physical point that happens, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that his mind must be that way. And then he eventually curses God. He does that. And that pretty much breaks his religion, right? I mean, it's either yes or no. Do you believe that God is good, so you cannot curse him? You believe that his creation is good, thus you cannot curse it? You believe that deeply that that your life must be good in a way in the long term, and you cannot curse it. And that's how I will end this podcast, with the conclusion that religion is simply about being happy with your life, and the lack of religion is about being unhappy with your life, right? And I can think of some objections that are really stupid. I'm trying to think of a good objection to that, and I haven't found yet. I'm really interested in finding the truth, so I'm not about blindly defending this conclusion. But this certainly pisses off a bunch of people who are into religion for other goals. This will piss a lot of people. The simple idea that you need to be happy to have to be religious, and that also solves my question of what's the relation between faith and happiness, and intelligence and happiness. I know for a fact that intelligence and happiness are strongly correlated. That's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. And I also had an idea that from research and stuff, from research, I do know that there is a correlation of both. The correlation of religion was something like many times I've seen that some research says that religious people are more happy and stuff, and they have like some kind of mental resilience, and these are the details that you should not miss. That there's something called mental resilience and stuff. And I know that when I say happiness, if you have a unhappy mind, you will think of some bad definition of that word. But if you have a logical, tautological mind, you try to understand what I'm talking about. I think that eventually happiness becomes a habit. Like I've been like this kid, this euphoric kid from time to time, and you eventually gain the ability to identify lies. Right? You get some experience in life, of course. Maybe that's the whole point. And even though you have to like solve like 5 problems, you try to be happy, and people like try to trick you and you get confused, but you eventually do solve it. I think it's very late here, I'm kind of tired. And eventually do solve it. I don't think that you should just you know I think that at the moment that you accept that there is an unhappy element to life, like in the long term, um, I've never really understood why people commit suicide besides like really serious health issues. But I do understand that these things are common, and people with I think regular health, and maybe not so regular, and it's not an alarming health, they do commit suicide. Maybe even healthy people do. And I guess that's how suicide happens, man. I think the moment that you start to think, the moment that you lose your religion, like you literally go away from the path of life, and you may even find yourself in some kind of death cult, some dumb shit, where everybody's angry and pissed, and there's a cult of anger, like. Uh, in that case, I really think that maybe he's already dead or something. That's a phrase that got stuck in my mind from a cartoon I used to watch. It's called. It's not really a cartoon. It's just a movie. It's a cartoonish movie, and it has a very serious tone, but it's also ridiculous because of what happens in it. It's so masculine. It's just ridiculous, man. The guy just starts punching a bunch of mountains and buildings. It's just crazy. It's called Fist of the North Star, and there is more than one movie about it. And in his fights, the main character tells the bad guy that you are already dead, and that's deep, man. It's so deep. And we have that in the New Testament, like the part of Acts, and people get killed just by some words, and it's not a. It happened already. There is many events in history where that happened. We assume that it's just something to do with the heart, something to do with the brain, like some kind of unregulation due to some chemistry imbalance. But man, today I've seen like a guy getting hit by lightning twice. He's walking, like he's from Australia or New Zealand, and it's raining, and there's a camera, and it's all dark. It's like black and white,
recording, and I think it's from last year. And he's walking down the street after some couple, and he doesn't have an umbrella. He's just walking, and then boom, lightning hits him, and it's amazing. He just you can see that the ground gets marked with some dark stuff, and he just lays there for like 1 minute, and then he gets up, and he just goes on, like gives it like it takes like 10 steps, and it's just like walking normally, and it's not doesn't seem to be really destroyed or something. His body seems fine. He's just walking after getting hit by lightning, and then another lightning like 10 meters away hits him again, and there are many trees around there, man. It's like the lightning selects him, and of course you have to consider all the mathematics, like how rare is that supposed to be. And I've seen some cases of people surviving this, and it's amazing. I've seen some cases where people don't survive this, where they get really destroyed. Their faces are melted or something. Their eyes become liquid. Eventually, you have to accept reality. That's my point. That's what. That's how. For example, eventually, I think that as a religious person, you have to accept physics for whatever that means. Like, if that means that there are ghosts out there, if that means that there's something out there, you have to accept it. Because if you're religious, you're happy with it. You have come to the logical conclusion that it's necessarily good, right? And if that's a measure of religion, that must be a measure of faith. For example, there is that story that Jesus and his disciples were on a boat, and there was a storm there, and it's similar to the situation just described, and there were a lot of waves, and people were like scared, and they weren't feeling well, right? And it seems that Jesus was just dreaming, was sleeping or something. And then people wake him up. They say that they woke him up, and it's like, oh man, you guys are so boring. You guys are so sad and stuff. And then he talks to the wind and the rain and the waves, and everything's cool again. And then that's good because it defines, the idea is that it defines faith, right? He says that you guys have no faith, and then he does that. And wow, so what were these people doing? They were really like desperate. They were like really sad. They were thinking, wow man, this is it. Like, imagine how bad you feel if you really gets caught on a life or death situation. It must be really uncomfortable, right? I've seen some war movies. I'm pretty sure that's really uncomfortable, especially if you're surprised by it, if you're not expecting or something. Maybe even if you're expecting, like, the anxiety must kick in. Must be awful. Yeah, I guess that's it. I was aiming for 2 hours today. It's 4 a.m. here. Maybe this was a mistake. 4 a.m. That's not a good timing. And that means if I'm going to sleep for 8 hours, then I'm going to have to wake up 12. So I guess I should instead sleep for less than 7 hours, like 6 hours and a half.
and wake up around 10 and then sleep earlier tomorrow. And by tomorrow I mean today, because it's past midnight, right? Alright. Good morning, everyone, and good night.